The bell tolled once, and then the mountain went silent. No wind, no birds, only the echo of metal fading into eternity. In the valley below, smoke crawled like a living shadow, swallowing the sunrise. Inside, the convent of Street. Helena, 23 women knelt in prayer, their whispers trembling like candles before a storm. They didn't know that dawn would be their last, or that their prayers would echo for centuries beneath the earth. Outside, an empire approached, not with mercy, but with silence. Their banners bled red against the sky, their footsteps like thunder rolling from the east. But what the world would remember was not the conquest of kingdoms. It was what they did to the women who refused to bow. Historians buried it. Chronicles erased it. But the walls beneath the Sultan's palace still remember crosses carved by fingernails, prayers scratched into stone, and 4 Latin words that refuse to die. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This is not just a story about faith. It's about the moment light entered hell and refused to leave. 1. When faith became a target. After the fall of Constantinople, the world of Christendom trembled. The great cathedrals were silent, their bells melted into weapons. Crosses were stripped from domes that once kissed heaven. Sultan Mehmed II stood victorious, not merely as a conqueror of cities, but as the architect of something darker, a conquest of souls. He understood what most tyrants never learn. You don't destroy a faith by spilling its blood. You destroy it by erasing its memory. So the Ottomans began a quiet war. One fought not with blades, but with ink, silence, and fear. Churches were turned into mosques, icons plastered over, names rewritten in new tongues. The Hagia Sophia, once the beating heart of Eastern Christianity, was crowned with a crescent. Yet across the mountains of Thessaly, a defiant sound lingered, the morning bell of Street Helena's convent. To the Sultan's men, it was more than noise. It was rebellion. Each toll declared, "We still believe." And so, the order came, silence it. The soldiers who approached that convent expected weakness, women who had never seen war, who held rosaries instead of swords. But they were wrong. Inside those stone walls, the sisters prepared not for survival, but for sacrifice. They gathered around the altar, whispering the words of Psalm 27, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" That prayer rose like fire as the gates shook under the strike of iron. They knew the world outside was changing forever, but inside those walls, eternity still breathed. The first cannonball fell before dawn. The bell shattered mid-ring, scattering fragments across the courtyard. Yet in that silence, something unbreakable was born, faith that would not yield to empire. Because sometimes, the quietest prayers echo loudest in history. 2. The 7 days of silence. When the smoke cleared, the convent was no longer a sanctuary, it was a cage. The Ottomans sealed the gates and left 23 women trapped inside with no food, no water, and no light. Their silence was the empire's experiment. How long could faith survive starvation? At first, fear filled the halls. Some prayed aloud, others wept quietly in the shadows. But on the second night, a voice rose through the darkness, a young sister named Magdalena, barely 20. Her voice trembled but did not break. She whispered Psalm 23, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." One by one, the others joined her until the entire chapel pulsed with a sound that felt like light breaking through stone. The soldiers outside heard it too. What they expected to be cries of surrender became hymns of defiance. These women were starving, but they would not beg. They were imprisoned, but they were free in spirit. The same discipline that had once trained them for fasting, silence, and humility now became their armor. By the 3rd day, the soldiers brought food and water, temptation disguised as mercy. The eldest sister, Theodora, lifted the bread and whispered, "They want our hunger to break our souls. Let it feed our prayer instead." No one ate. On the fourth day, Hasan Pasha himself entered the chapel. His voice was calm, almost kind. "The Sultan offers you life, comfort, protection. Speak the words and be free." Sister Helena met his gaze and replied softly, "We already belong to a king who cannot be dethroned." For the first time, the conqueror had no answer. Because in that dark room, surrounded by frail and starving women, he saw something greater than power. He saw eternity staring back. 3. The Road of Chains. At dawn, the gates opened, not to grant freedom, but to begin humiliation. The sisters were bound with ropes, their hands tied, their habits torn by the wind. "You will walk to Constantinople," Hasan Pasha declared. "Your king will not save you there." And so they walked 23 women, barefoot across scorched roads and jagged stones. For 7 days, the empire's soldiers led them through villages and valleys, forcing the people to watch as an example of what happens when faith defies empire. Yet, even in chains, they walked with dignity. They sang the Agnus Dei under their breath. "Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world, have mercy on us." The first to fall was Sister Irene, her legs buckled beneath her, her lips still whispering prayers. 2 others lifted her, carried her until sunset, and when she died, they buried her with their bare hands. No priest, no altar, just tears and dust. Hasan marked her name in his ledger. 1 less. But every death only made the others stronger. Their silence became a weapon, their suffering a sermon. By the 5th day, even the soldiers began to lower their voices in the sisters' presence. There was something unsettling about women who should have broken long ago but hadn't. When they reached the coast, their bodies were weak, but their eyes still burned with the fire of conviction. They had lost everything but the one thing that cannot be taken, faith. And as they were forced onto the ship that would carry them to Constantinople, Sister Magdalena looked back at the road they had walked. The sun was setting in a sky the color of blood, and she whispered, "We are not the conquered, we are the witnesses." That night, the sea carried them toward their final test. 4. The hidden chapel beneath the throne. The ship that carried the sisters reached Constantinople beneath a sky veiled in mist. The city glittered like gold, but beneath its beauty lay a silence that swallowed hope. The women were led through crowded streets, past merchants, soldiers, and nobles, until the shadow of the Hagia Sophia loomed above them. Once, it had been the heart of Christendom. Now, the crescent crowned its dome, and the cross was nowhere to be seen. They were not taken to prisons or dungeons. Instead, they were led down narrow stairways beneath the Sultan's palace, a labyrinth of stone where the air was cold and damp. It was a place that did not exist on maps. There, the empire's forgotten labors worked unseen, and among them, the nuns became servants. They scrubbed marble floors, washed the garments of their captors, and carried water for men who mocked the god they served. But when the palace slept, something sacred stirred. The sisters gathered in a hidden corner of the tunnels, a hollow carved into stone where no guard ventured. They lit candles made from kitchen wax, whispered psalms from memory, and traced crosses into the walls with shards of broken pottery. They built an altar from scraps, placed a fragment of glass shaped like a cross upon it, and called it their chapel. Night after night, they prayed in that secret darkness. They recited the Gospel of John. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Their voices barely rose above a whisper, yet heaven heard. Centuries later, archaeologists would uncover that chamber walls etched with dozens of tiny crosses, fingerprints still pressed into the wax, and 4 Latin words carved by trembling hands. Lux in Tenebris Lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and it still does. 5. The light that outlived the empire. Centuries passed. The Ottoman banners that once blazed red across the horizon turned to dust, and the sultans who ruled the world were swallowed by time. But beneath their vanished throne, something still breathed the faith they tried to silence. In 2011, during restoration work under the old Topkapi Palace, archaeologists broke through a false wall and stepped into a room untouched for 500 years. What they found froze them where they stood. Hundreds of tiny crosses carved into the stone. Scratches made not by tools, but by human fingernails. Along one wall, in Latin, 4 words still shimmered through the dust. Lux in Tenebris Lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Those marks weren't decoration. They were the heartbeat of women who refused to vanish. Each carving was a psalm without words, each line a vow whispered into eternity. They didn't need marble altars or choirs to be heard, only faith, sharpened by suffering, and hope that reached beyond history's reach. The empire that sought to erase them had long collapsed, its cities fallen quiet. But these silent witnesses remained. Their scratches outlived swords. Their prayers outlasted crowns. Theologians say that faith is not proven by miracles, but by endurance, and these women proved both. In darkness, they became light. In captivity, they became free. Perhaps that is why the Gospel of John was etched upon their hearts. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Empires fall, names fade, but light, once born of faith, cannot die. And somewhere, beneath the earth, in that chamber of stone and silence, it still flickers, reminding us that the most unbreakable fortress in history was built not of walls, but of prayer. Conclusion. The legacy of unbroken faith. The story of the Sisters of St. Catherine is not just a tragedy, it's a revelation. These women were stripped of everything, their home, their freedom, even their names. Yet what the empire couldn't take was the one thing that truly mattered: their light. Beneath the earth, where no one was meant to see, they became living testaments to the power of faith that endures when all else fails. Their silence was not defeat, it was worship. Their chains were not bondage, they were testimony. Through their suffering, they carved into stone the truth that the gospel had already declared. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Today, as we walk through a world still haunted by cruelty, silence, and erasure, their story reminds us that even in the darkest chambers of history, light finds a way to survive. It challenges us to remember that real faith isn't measured by comfort, but by courage, the courage to believe when belief costs everything. So when you face your own trials, when the world feels heavy and your prayers seem to echo unanswered, remember those crosses scratched into stone. Remember that the same God who saw them in the dark sees you now. And now I'll leave you with this question. If faith could survive 500 years buried beneath an empire's throne, what might your faith endure if you stopped letting fear silence it? How many walls in your life could be transformed into altars if you dared to carve hope into them? If this story moved you, share it. Let their light continue to shine through us, because as long as their names are remembered, their faith still lives.